to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Mark Armstrong, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the Executive Director of the Nebraska State Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association. Welcome to the podcast, Army.
Hey, thanks, Hutch.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation and world where you grew up, your first job, etc.
Okay. Kind of in a nutshell, I've been a lifetime Nebraskan, born and raised, spent my entire career in the state of Nebraska. Went to the University of Nebraska, got my undergrad there. Right out of college, I taught biology and PE at Bellevue West High School in Omaha. During that time, I coached 3 sports for 9 years, football, basketball, and track. During that time, got my undergrad from the University of Nebraska, Omaha in educational leadership. Jumped into the world of athletic administration and spent a 28-year career in the athletic administration position. 3 different stops. I had 4 years in a school of about 500 students, something like that. And then went to Kearney High School, which is a large high school in the central part of the state. Spent 14 years there as an athletic administrator, and then kind of followed my kids to Lincoln and spent the last 10 years at Lincoln Southwest as activities director, and just retired as of June 30th and had the opportunity to take over the executive director position here in the state of Nebraska for the NSIAAA. So,
where was your, what city was your first school in, the small school? First as an AD?
Was Holdridge, little town called Holdridge, which was about 30 miles southwest of Kearney, kind of right in the middle of the state. Was the smallest town that I ever lived in, about 6,000 people, and that was a little bit of an adjustment, but we still have really, really close friends that live in Holdridge, and a great place to get your feet wet.
Let's talk for a minute about the opportunity you have growing up in Omaha, if I heard you correctly, participating in youth sports.
Actually, I grew up in Grand Island.
Oh,
What's
okay.
that?
No, I obviously heard wrong. So you grew up in Grand Island, then?
Yep, and then I started my teaching career in Omaha.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
So talk about Grand Island and about the possible youth sports you played there, etc.
Yeah, probably just kind of a typical kid back in the late 60s, early 70s, and kind of just football, basketball, and track were kind of the 3 things that I did as far as organized sports. Otherwise, spent a lot of time outdoors, water skiing and doing that kind of fun stuff. But participated in all 3 of those sports all through high school, and then had the opportunity to could have run track in college, but decided that I wanted to go to the university and just be a student, and so that's kind of what I did.
Let's talk for a moment about your decision after coaching 3 sports for 9 years. So that in and of itself is a one-way ticket to heaven. But let's talk about what made you decide to leave coaching and go into athletic administration.
Yeah, probably more so than anything was the impact of my dad. Dad was a longtime teacher, was a head basketball coach for many years. Went the administrative route, and so when it came time while I was early in my teaching career, trying to decide what what direction I wanted to go with my master's, because I needed to start taking some grad classes so I could move on the pay scale and those types of things. And after talking to Dad said, well, you might want to look at going through and getting your administrative degree, because that will potentially open some more doors at the scholastic level, moving into an administrative role, whereas a master's degree in a teaching area may create some opportunities at, say, a collegiate level, but not necessarily, at the high school level, those types of things. And so obviously coaching 3 sports for 9 years, you develop a love and a passion for athletics and working with kids. And so once I got my administrative degree, had an opportunity only 9 years into my career to jump into an assistant principal, activities director role. And got to be honest with you, part of the reason that we made the jump from teaching into that and taking a particular position was it was closer to our cabin at the lake. So instead of a 4-hour drive, it was an hour and a half.
Well, absolutely. You got to keep the important things on the top of the list.
That's right. So that's kind of how I made that move towards administration. It's one of those things where it seems like if you're in athletic administration long enough, you truly have a passion for athletics, and never had a desire to be a principal or district level superintendent, anything along those lines. Was just not an interest of mine. I like the academic stuff, but just wasn't my passion, not like athletics was. And so that's why I've stuck with athletic administration, and feel like, with the exception of those 4 years I was in Holdridge, spending 14 years in one position in Kearney and then another 10 years at the position at Lincoln Southwest, it wasn't a scenario where I was hopping and skipping from job to job, those types of things. And so during those particular periods of time, you had an opportunity to really create the culture that you want to create with your athletic department. And if you're in it long enough, you have the opportunity to hire a lot of coaches. And then it seems like, as I reflect back on my career in Kearney and as well as in Lincoln, I think at Southwest, for example, there were only maybe 2 out of our 19 head coaches that were original when I got there. Hopefully that wasn't a reflection on me, but it was just attrition and, those types of things. But it really provides you an opportunity to create, the culture within a program that you want to create. And so I kind of stuck with it rather than, well, here's a better opportunity. So after 2 years, jumping ship and going someplace else, that was just not something I was going to do.
You mentioned your father, and so I want you to mention some of the other mentors in your life that had a big influence on you as way back from when you started until you retired recently.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Dad was the one that, because I was originally going to go into physical therapy, and finally I decided that, I really wanted to teach and coach. And that was about halfway through my undergrad. And I remember telling Dad, and he was like, well, it's about time you made that decision. So he was a big impact in terms of modeling and kind of what I wanted to do. While I was at Bellevue West in Omaha, I worked for an athletic administrator named Steve Yackel. Steve was heavily involved with our state ADs Association, and really got to learn from him as working for him as a coach. But also how he interacted with people, how he interacted with coaches, and really kind of worked to develop that program. And one of the things that Steve did, I think it was only a year after I had left Bellevue and went to Holdridge, was he was on our NSIAAA board at that time. And in fact, I think he was either vice president or president. But anyways, he gave me a call and said, hey, the NIAAA is starting this new program called leadership training. Brand new, don't really know anything about it, but I want you to go to the conference in Orlando, and they're going to offer two classes. One's called 501, one's called 502, and it's an 8-hour day. I want you to go find out about it, take the classes, and then report back to see if this is something we want to do in our state. And so it was kind of that proverbial tap on the shoulder that he saw potential in me in terms of how I potentially could lead and those types of things. And so it was that tap on the shoulder that kind of got me going, not only with the NIAAA, but also really taking a deep dive into the profession of athletic administration and what that means, not only for me personally, but also the impact that you can have on kids and programs and coaches and those types of things. So he was probably one of the big ones here in the state of Nebraska. The other mentors, I was trying to think of specific individuals, but I look at really our whole NIAAA family, and so that having the opportunity to have been involved with the NIAAA as long as I have, you get to know people such as yourself, working with people like Frank Kovaleski and Mike and Bruce and Phil and all these different people that as you stop and you look back are really, when you talk about the best of the best, having the opportunity to learn from, to model things that they're doing and being able to take those things back to the state of Nebraska. There's an endless list of NIAAA people that I would consider mentors that had a major impact on my career.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you a fairly serious question for a moment, Army. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Right. So, I'll try to get through this without choking up. So we lost a granddaughter a year ago. She passed away of trisomy 13, which was a genetic disorder, extremely rare, kind of one of those fluke type deals. But having gone through that experience, as ugly as it was, and watching your own kids go through managing that type of stuff, the one thing that stuck out is this job in this profession can just swallow you up if you're not careful. You can spend so many hours at work trying to do different things or whatever, that a lot of times you forget that there's things outside of the profession. And so, that's one of the takeaways that I had from that was you can't forget your family. You have to maintain balance with your life. That you can still do a great job in your profession, but it's also important to make sure that you're paying attention to loving people around you, such as family, those types of things. And I think that as I look back early on when our kids were younger, to be honest with you, my wife really raised our three boys a lot on her own, until they were old enough to follow me to school and hang around in the gym and, those types of things. And so, the takeaway is you don't take life for granted, and so that was probably the big thing that I would have to say.
Well, that's a tough situation, having lost a boy myself years and years ago. It doesn't matter the time of year, doesn't matter how old or how young you are. That's just a tough thing. So thanks so much for sharing.
Yep.
I want to ask you, the job of AD today, 2023, how is it different from when you started in 1995?
Right. It's interesting because I remember my comp question when I was taking my comprehensive exam for my grad class. And one of the questions that was asked was the difference between a manager and a leader. And I think when I reflect back when I first got started 28 years ago or whatever, I think a lot of what we were doing as athletic administrators was more what I would probably say were athletic directors. And that we were doing things like, making sure we had coaches, making sure we had schedules. In a lot of cases, ADs were painting fields, mowing, being an electrician, fixing scoreboards, all those different types of things. And I think as time has gone on, I think the job has gotten a lot more complex. Hence, I think part of the nomenclature being changed from, in a lot of cases, from an athletic director to an athletic administrator. There's so many different things that now are part of our job, part of our everyday that we haven't really thought about, that wasn't there when we started 28 years ago. The two that really jump out is the impact on, or the impact of social media. The number of code of conduct violations that we had prior to social media was extremely less than what it is now, just with the prevalence of kids that are on social media and trying to navigate their lives through a digital format rather than face to face, and those types of things. And so, but along with that, kind of we absorbed, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of that same mentality in our office, that we felt like, okay, well, now we need to get stuff on Twitter, and being able to post results and post pictures and post motivational quotes and those types of things. And now anymore, that's kind of one of the main functions that we do as an athletic administrator, is promote your program using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these different social media platforms that are available to us now. So really, I'd say our marketing has probably become a bigger issue, or a bigger part of what we do. I think part of things like Huddle and kids trying to promote themselves for college scholarships and those types of things. NIL now is something that we have to deal with, and working with our student athletes and making sure that they're making good decisions as far as those types of things. And I think the other piece is the amount of emphasis on student safety, student mental health, concussion management, those types of things. Those things didn't exist when we first started as ADs, and now are essential to making sure that our kids are growing up in a safe, healthy environment, and can participate without going out and playing football with the concussion that they've had from 3 weeks ago that they haven't shaken yet, and those types of things. So I'd say just a lot more have gotten put onto our plates.
Thanks for sharing that insight. Let's talk for a moment about your journey with the NSIAAA and the NIAAA. I know you mentioned earlier your mentor that picked you up early, way back when you took the 2 courses in Orlando. But talk about that journey for those who don't know, which probably isn't very many people. You're a former president of the NIAAA, so that's important. But I want you to talk about the journey through the state association, and then your journey through the national association.
Right. Well, actually, my journey with the state association was a result of my involvement at the nationals. And so coming back from that 8-hour class in Orlando, and reporting back to our state board, and basically saying, this is going to be a great opportunity to provide professional development for our athletic administrators across the state. I think this is something that we need to take a look at and offer to our members. And so as we kind of got into it and taught a couple classes, we quickly realized that this really needed to be a position on our state board, our NSIAAA board, as a leadership training state coordinator. And so we pretty much set that position up early in my career, and probably spent, I was over 20 years on our state board, serving in the role of leadership training. And through leadership training, had the opportunity to go to the state coordinators meetings that were always in Indianapolis, and always looked forward to that, because again, it was just a great opportunity to network with other state coordinators from around the country, and just making those connections and getting to know people and so forth. And so through that particular involvement, you have more people tapping you on the shoulder. And I would like to thank you, Hutch, because you tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'm the chair of the awards committee, and we've got some openings, and so I would encourage you to apply for the awards committee." And I'm thinking, okay, well, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the national conference every year. Our district allowed me to do that, and so I thought, well, okay, sounds like fun, and so jumped on to the awards committee and served on that committee for quite a while, just as a member, and then had the opportunity to serve as a vice chair for you on the awards committee. And then a couple years later, had the opportunity to move into the awards chair position, and that whole awards committee is such an amazing committee, and probably more than anything, just having the honor of being able to meet, to greet, to interact with national level award winners at the national conference, because as members of the awards committee, we work specifically with the award winners during the presentation of their awards, and so everything from, here's where you're going to sit, here's where you need to walk, you're going to go up, and all those different types of things. But you have an opportunity to directly interact with, literally the best of the best that are being recognized by the NIAAA for their service to their states and to the country in that particular role. So again, as time kind of goes on and you make more and more connections, had the opportunity to run for the at-large NIAAA board position, which quite frankly scared the crap out of me, because as if you go to the national conference, that at-large candidates speak at the national conference, give a little dog and pony, here's why I want, please vote for me type deals. And so that was nerve-wracking in itself, but was fortunate to get elected to that particular position on the board, and served 3 years on the NIAAA board. Decided to throw my name in for president-elect. Had the opportunity to step into that position, and in 2016 served as the NIAAA president. And again, that was probably one of the most rewarding pieces, just simply because you get to meet so many people and travel all across the country, not only promoting the NIAAA, but also promoting the profession of athletic administration and what we can offer to our members. And so spent 5 years on the NIAAA board. Shortly after I got off the board, was approached by the NIAAA to serve as the general chair for the NIAAA's 5th strategic plan. And so again, had the opportunity to assemble a tremendous strategic planning committee. I'm going to be honest with you, when I looked at the list of names that were going to be serving on our committees, I'm thinking, how did I end up in this? I mean, these are such high flyers, almost intimidating because of some of the folks that were on, just because they are so entrenched in athletic administration, and it was just an awesome experience. And so that was about a 1.5 year long process, developing that, presenting it to the board, and then it was adopted here a few years ago, and they're in the process of getting ready for the 6th,
right,
and that route. So time flies, and then so that's kind of that was my NIAAA career. And then as I retired in June, excuse me, I thought, well, okay, so how am I going to stay connected? And unfortunately, we had Bill Fitzgerald, who was our current executive director for our state, our NSIAAA, passed away. And so kind of got asked to, hey, can you step in and help us out for a while? And that a while turned into a permanent position as executive director at the NSIAAA, and I'm trying to feel my way around. Unfortunately, the transition is not as smooth as it normally would be if Bill was still around. But so I'm trying to muddle my way through. But I've got lots of good help from other executive directors from across the country. So
allow me to ask you a follow-up about the recent NEDC, which would have been your first one.
Right.
And your impressions there, and the importance of an executive director being part of that group.
Right. Well, I think the main thing is that, just like when we served as athletic administrators, there's a lot of people that are a heck of a lot smarter than I am, and so kind of tapping into their experience, their leadership, their creative thinking on how to promote an organization, how to effectively run an organization, those types of things. And that clearly jumped out at the NEDC meeting in Traverse City, that we're all in this together. We're all trying to provide the best experience for athletic administrators in our states. And so how can we best do that? And whether that's through working with sponsors and getting sponsorships for state organizations, different programs that we can utilize, how to best manage membership, and what types of technologies are out there to help us do that. But probably the biggest thing that I enjoyed was listening to people talk about, here's my brag, here's what we're doing well. Here's what I want to share, and here's what I need some help with, and just to really get into the nuts and bolts and brass tacks of what we're trying to do, and how we can help each other, and that collaboration with everybody is just phenomenal, because we're able to take that stuff back to our own states and see what we can do with it here.
Have you got any stories, some highlights from your time on the NIAAA board, your 5 years, that you may want to relate to our audience? I'm sure you've got a ton.
Oh, well, I think the one that stands out, and I mentioned earlier, just the opportunity to travel around the country and not only see different parts of the country, but also to meet athletic administrators and executive directors from across the country was truly an amazing experience that I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. But it was interesting because as we were at NEDC, I was eating with Damian Frasnelli, and we were just talking about our experiences as president on the board, and different things that you kind of didn't anticipate that you had to kind of work through, and those types of things. And so I was telling Damian that the NIAAA's part of the strategic plan was to look at our at-large process at the national level, and the idea, or one of the items that we were to look to investigate on the strategic plan, was the idea of adding a fourth at-large position. Well, as you know, the NIAAA was kind of set up in three main regions, or six main regions, but you ended up with essentially two or three candidates for at-large that had to run against each other. And so the idea was adding a fourth at-large. Well, that occurred during my presidency, in terms of how are we going is this something we're interested in doing? How are we going to get feedback from across the country at section meetings, and all those types of things. And so one of the things that very clearly jumped out was the idea of how do we pair up different sections to run against each other, and making sure that it was somewhat equitable. And then you figured in location of the national conference would have an impact on the number of votes, because if you're closer to the national conference, you're going to have more people voting. And if you happen to be running in the state where that national conference is held, you're going to get a lot of votes just because that's who's there. And so I remember we were talking about the different aspects and how are we gonna put section 1 versus section 6 and section 8 versus section 2 and trying to muddle our way through what's going to be the best way of going about that and matching sections up and whatever. And I remember having that sinking feeling that you get when all of a sudden you could feel like you're losing control. that the conversation was getting louder and louder, and people's faces were getting redder and redder, and because everybody had very, very strong opinions about what that should look like and what should that look like for my particular section that I'm representing and whatever. And so needless to say, things were getting ramped up pretty good. And I remember thinking, okay, this is very quickly, we're going to reach the point where this is no longer productive. And so, I mean, it was still a great conversation, but it was kind of, well, heated is probably the best way to describe it.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, okay, how do I reel this back in? How do I get people settled back down or whatever the case might be? And so finally we kind of got a little bit of a break, and I said, okay, you know what, we're going to pick this conversation up, but we need about a 15-minute break because we've been going at it for quite a while. And so everybody kind of dispersed, and I just kind of sat there trying to figure out, okay, I got to break the tension somehow. But I'm really scrapping trying to figure out how I'm going to, because otherwise we're just going to jump right back in. And so I went in and I told Patty Conrad, I said, I need some paper. And she kind of went, like any kind of paper? I said, just blank paper. I don't care. And so I grabbed a bunch of paper, and so when we reconvened, I told everybody, pass the stack of paper around, and I told everybody, okay, I need you to take 5 pieces of paper and then pass the stack around so everybody's got 5 pieces of paper. And they're like, okay. So once that happened, I said, okay, what we're going to do is in the boardroom in the NIAAA is this, it's more rectangle than it is square, but the board table is this, I mean, it's a great big table, whatever. Well, so I said, all right, I need the half of the room that's on my side to come around on my side of the table, and the people that are on the other half need to go to the sides over across from each other. And so that all happened. And so I said, okay, I want you to take your paper and I want to wad it up. I want you to make a wad of paper, make it a ball. And so I said, okay, for the next 45 seconds, we're going to have a paper fight. And what we're going to do is we're going to see which side of the table can get the majority of the wads of paper on the other sides on their side of the table. And then when we're done, we'll count up and see who win or whatever. And so we had 45 minutes of paper, or 45 seconds of a paper war. Definitely relieved the tension and kind of got people kind of some nervous energy out and whatnot. So then we sat down and were able to have a little bit more productive of a meeting, but that'll be something I won't forget for a while.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing. Let me ask you your observations about, well, I say the recent conference, but it's been probably, by the time this airs, it will have been 9 months ago, the recent conference in Nashville.
In Nashville.
Really different from the one in Denver, because in Denver, we still had the masks on and we're still somewhat quarantined a little bit, but obviously everyone knows it was the most attended national conference, but I'm interested in your observations.
I think the thing that I noticed, and particularly when you're on your board and you're on the NIAAA board and you get the attendance numbers and in the reports and those types of things, at the national conference, I mean, when I was president, I was ecstatic because it was the largest national conference that NIAAA had ever had. Well, that went right out the window the next year for Rich. And I think every year that the conference has continued to grow and grow and grow. And so what I guess my observations is that people are wanting to grow. People are wanting to learn. People are wanting to share, to collect ideas, those types of things. And I think once people step foot into a national conference, they realize the power that conference can have on an AD personally, because they can take so many different ideas. Just the networking, the conversations that take place at dinner, sitting in the hallways, those types of things, is invaluable. And I think as we continue to grow it as an organization, those numbers are going to continue to get bigger and bigger. Our leadership training program continues to churn out new courses that are relevant to what we're doing every day as ADs. And so it just gets better every year. Just nothing drastic, but just little refinements here and there that really make it such a special experience for folks that are coming in, and particularly the new ones. And I think over the last couple of years, the first time attendee numbers have just skyrocketed, which is a great sign that you're doing something right, because we're offering something that people are looking for.
That's a great answer, and that's some great thoughts about the conference. What's the favorite part of your job as executive director now? Now that you're out of, now you're no longer in a building, so you can't say being around the students.
Yeah, I know it. I know it. The tough part, Hutch, is that I've only been at this for about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And so really haven't gotten to do a whole lot at the state level, other than trying to take a dive into the notebooks and the things that the documents that we've got that I need to know as an executive director. Things like, do we have a contract for our fall convention? Who do we contact for awards? What does membership look like? And all those types of things that you would ask the previous executive director.
Right.
But I'm kind of having to muddle through it myself. And so I would say that, that the highlight so far obviously has been the trip to Traverse City and being able to meet and learn from experienced executive directors and those types of things. But I think as we get going, really having the opportunity to continue to serve our profession, that was probably the big drawback, or the big holdback that I had when I was trying to decide whether I was going to retire or not. Is I've done this for so long and had so many fantastic experiences with working with kids and working with coaches and other ADs, that thinking, what am I going to do to stay connected? And so this just provides a wonderful opportunity to continue to serve, continue to make what we're doing a better experience for our student athletes, because somebody asked me a long time ago, why do you do what you do? And I always went back to I want our kids, when they walk across the graduation stage, to look back at their careers in activities, not necessarily has to be athletics, but activities, and just say, wow, I can't believe this is over. I'm really going to miss this experience because I absolutely loved it. And if people and kids are thinking that way when they're walking across the stage, that means that we're doing something right, and we're having an impact on kids. And so this provides an opportunity to stay connected.
Well said. Wrapping up here now, I need Army's 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic director, and they need to follow these suggestions in order to be successful. What would your 2 suggestions be?
Kind of what I alluded to earlier is making sure that you find balance in your life. As I mentioned, with so many activities that we have going on in our schools now, it is so easy to live at school. Whether it's, we've got a choir concert tonight, we've got a basketball game, all these different types of things that are going on. You have to be able to once in a while say, hey, principal, can you cover for me? I need a night so I can take my wife out to dinner, or whatever the case might be. And if you don't maintain that balance, something's going to suffer. and it's going to either go one of two ways. You're either going to spend the majority of your time at work and your family's going to suffer, or you're not work enough and the work side of it suffers because you're not organized or those types of things. And so trying to strike a balance, and probably the big thing that I would make sure that they understand is that you can't control everything, that you need to be able to control the things that you can control, and the things that you can't control, you have to let go. Because if you try to control those things you can't control, it's going to eat you alive, and then your balance is out of whack, and it's going to be a struggle. So that would be the first thing. Find balance, control the things that you can control. And the other one is, don't forget that the most successful leaders lead because they serve. And so, if you go into a position where you're demanding people's respect, demanding that they do exactly what you say, and you don't give them the autonomy to grow professionally themselves, you're not going to be as effective of a leader. And so, you lead by serving. How can I help? How can I help you, student athlete that's struggling because your parents are going through a divorce or whatever? How can I serve you as a coach? Can it be a scenario where I'm going to have a conversation with a parent that's driving you crazy, and asking them, hey, what are you wanting from this experience? How can we help? But also, how are we helping our coaches navigate the things that are maybe causing them some issues? But really, it's leadership through serving and putting other people first, in front of yourself and your own goals and those types of things. And so that would be my second one: lead by serving.
A final question, Army. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I think when you talk to people that get out of our profession, I think the number one reason that people get out of the field of athletic administration is the time commitment. And when new ADs or administrators are looking at the position, a lot of them get scared away because of, I'm going to be at school all the time. There are so many games, and I'm not going to see my family, and and those types of things. And then once people do take the jobs, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I'm never at home. I'm always at school. I'm always doing this. My phone, I'm on 24/7 because a bus breaks down at midnight. You're in bed. Well, you get to deal with it. Those types of things. And so, kind of how, for those of us that have been in the profession and stuck with it as long as we did, how did you do it? So that would be the question that if I could offer advice, and after, again, just for myself, spending 28 years in that particular role where you are being asked to be at school a lot. And again, I think number one, you need to have open conversations with your spouse and making sure that they're on board, that when they start feeling lonely or they're struggling with your absence or whatever the case might be, being able to keep those lines of communication with your significant other about, how are you feeling? I remember having conversations with Lori about, she's, I just feel like I'm raising the kids myself, and so it was a wake up call to me to say, balance. You got to go back to that balance piece and making sure that you're taking care of, the family and personal side as well as the professional side. So I think that's the key to longevity. Otherwise it's a lot.
Thank you on that note. That's great. That wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Mark Armstrong, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the Director of the NSIAAA. Army, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
I appreciate it, Hutch. Thanks.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.